Can I welcome our second panel of witnesses, and can I ask you all to start by introducing yourself, and can I pass you to Louise?
Hi, I'm Louise Cameron and I'm the Vice Chair of the Scottish Youth Parliament.
I'm Reverend David Coleman. I'm here in my capacity as the convener of the Church and Society Committee of the National Synod of Scotland of the United Reformed Church.
I'm Ross Wright from the Humanist Society. I'm a celebrant and the spokesperson on equal marriage.
Good morning, I'm Mark Bevan from Amnesty International.
However, if we turn it on its head, and I always think it's useful to turn things on their head to see, would it be reasonable for me as an atheist, as I think somebody alluded to, me as an atheist registrar, to not to marry somebody if I knew them to be religious? Now that would be unthinkable. So why, in uniquely this situation with sexuality, we're making this special provision? And it seems that if the opinion is of MSPs that lesbian and gay people should be regarded as equal, then everybody is equal. One point I would like to make about the conscience clauses, and I think it was alluded to maybe by Mr. Eadie, was that it works only one way, in that people whose organisations have opted in, for example, a humanist, could themselves refuse to do marriages, which would be fair enough. However, those opted out organisations, the freedom of conscience for those individuals, for example, a Catholic priest or a minister of Church of Scotland, would not be respected. So conscience needs to be looked at from both directions.
Yes, so again, no celebrant will have to perform same-sex marriage if they don't wish. Right. The protection for education, the various other freedoms, again, of expression, speech, right, are all supposed to be contained in the bill.
Yes.
Others, so there's both sides of the argument. One part of the argument are saying, that's fine, we are content with that because we don't wish to see religious bodies being forced, the term, into doing that, and therefore we believe that the principles contained in the bill are robust. However, the opposing view is that they're not and can be challenged, and the equality impact assessment casts some doubt on that, so I just wondered your own opinions.
We've obviously been following this intently over the last couple of years, and we have become convinced that the guarantees contained within the bill are adequate. From one point of view, they may even seem excessive, but maybe that's sufficient to guarantee that they are there and that no one is forced to engage in something which they are spiritually disinclined to do. So, as we've said before, we are in support of things because we believe the guarantees are there both to enable same-sex marriages to happen and to protect those who wish not to be a party to that, while at the same time, from a public order point of view, not being able to bully those who wish to go ahead out of that. Within the United Reformed Church, we greatly respect individual conscience and opinion, and that's, we try and this is why we haven't expressed an opinion as a denomination, because we know we contain people with different views. Looking at, having followed the process over the last 2 years, it seems that the protections are so thorough that if you are looking at total equality, this does not give it. But on the other hand, I think at the end of the day, when you get a couple coming and asking to be married, it will make no difference to them whatsoever. And if it reassures those who are opposed, then let's go with it. We certainly are not advocating that those protections be weakened, merely noting that they bring into effect a state of inequality, but it's perhaps a necessary one to enable equality to happen.
Rev Coleman?
We're talking civil here. We did discuss these issues within the committee, and certainly we felt that if something is offered by the state, it should be offered to all without exception. If there is an agent of the state, registrar or whatever, who has a conscientious problem, then that is the problem, if you like, of the state. And somebody should be found without hindrance to or inconvenience to those who are applying, who can conduct what's the ceremony that's required.
The main subject I want to discuss, and it need only be brief, because my object here is to ensure that I ask you the same question that I asked the last panel. And looking at the written evidence that the last panel provided, most, if not all, talked about the role of marriage within broader society. And the question I asked was that whether they saw marriage as having a role in providing stability in broader society as a basis for family, for rearing children, and for providing social stability across society. Do you have views on the role of marriage within that? And do you believe this change in the law will weaken the role of marriage in other aspects of society?
Looked through things. When we have discussions within the Synod of Scotland, certainly, we have started by trying to come to, as far as possible, come to a mind as what people in differing positions regard as essential to marriage. The commitment, the respect, the equality. And so I think it's likely that people, again, with differing opinions, would also say that marriage itself is beneficial to and a stabilizing factor in society. The discussion has been on how you define marriage, not that whether marriage itself is a good thing. We also certainly within the committee were very much of a mind that the introduction of same-sex marriage would not have any impact whatsoever on opposite-sex marriage.
I do find it puzzling that when the opponents of the bill suggest this, particularly because same-sex couples, whether you like it or not, do have children, be it by adoption, by surrogacy and so forth. And it logically follows that if you believe that marriage is good for children, it must logically follow that you must support marriage for same-sex couples with children. It is incoherent to argue both ways. Children, if children deserve the protection of marriage, then all children deserve that protection.
Might I return to Mr. Allard's question about the stability of society and marriage, just for a moment? Sorry? All right, Mr. Johnson. Again, within the conversations we've had over the last couple of years, the United Reformed Church Synod of Scotland can have no objection to marriage on the basis, or same-sex marriage, on the basis that it will not result in the conception of children. We're of the view, and I think this is a general consensus, that the nature of marriage is primarily the fellowship of the couple, and children are an additional blessing added to that. Though, again, speaking as a parent, my nurture of my children was not exhausted by donating one cell. The nurture of children is something which goes on throughout people's lives, and marriage can add to the stability of society by providing a place for that.
I was basically wanting to ask, the kinds of things that have been talked about as changes to education linked to this bill from those who oppose the bill, things like the editing of what textbooks might be available, the removal of discussion of marriage in same-sex terms from many sections of the classroom, that sort of thing. Do you think if that was enacted, would that make homophobic bullying better or worse?
Teachers are there to teach and they're there to educate, so it should really be about facilitating discussion if these are the discussions the children want to have, and not to express a view one way or the other, because that's not a teacher's job. I was privileged to have a modern studies teacher who, try as I may, I never found out what his political affiliations were. And that's the kind of teaching model I would like to see around sexuality and discussion of these kinds.
Reverend Coleman.
Again, based on our discussions, we certainly felt that what is taught in schools should not introduce the note of controversy, which would be intimidating to children in a same-sex family. So if this becomes law, then it's presented in the neutral sort of way that Mr. Wright just described, rather than that it's over in a corner as something furtive and secret.
the process, the timing of how we come up to this bill, I know you come up to this committee, do you think that it's been enough time since 2011? What are your views on the consultation that the Scottish Government brought forward? And on the other side of the bill, if the bill is accepted, what do you think about the review that the Scottish Government has said it would like to see? And will that maybe answer some of the concerns you have, or churches have as well, and will be answer all those concerns maybe in a year's time or after the bill is passed, if it's passed?
Reverend Coleman.
Well, our view is that things certainly have not been rushed. The consultations have been thorough, not to say repetitive. So, you know, we don't see there is any cause for further delay or further consultation. We know where people stand. Anyone with eyes and ears or ways of absorbing information knows where people stand. So we are content with the timetable and the care that's taken, particularly with protecting those who are opposed.
And the problem of rehearsing all of these arguments again and again is that the opponents have not demonstrated a shred of evidence of how any demonstrable harm could take place, nor any demonstrable harm from any other country where this already has happened. So it's not about numbers, it's about, is this going to benefit some people? Is it going to be detriment to anybody? And those questions have been resoundingly sorted out. So I think we should move with the speed we're going. As you say, everything has been examined very thoroughly, and there's no reason to not pass the bill.
Reverend Coleman.
On timing, I think I noted in what we handed in on paper that people are already marrying. So this whole discussion is not about whether people are marrying, but whether the church and, from your point of view, the state recognises that people are entering into a committed lifelong relationship with the aspiration that it's lifelong. And it was, again, something that came out of the discussions that we had, that we finally had to take seriously what everyone had been taught in college, that the people who marry are the couple. And the state or the churches recognise or don't recognise that.
Evidence in the earlier session from witnesses that they have a number of the religious denominations, principally the Church of Scotland, but others, have concerns about the robustness of the protections within the legislation and the opt-in provision. Is that something that your denomination, Reverend Coleman, discussed, and do you share those reservations?
We've discussed it at great length and been convinced that the protections are very robust indeed.
Say a little bit more about that, please.
Well, we looked at it, we took legal advice from people within the church and with it. We spoke to civil servants working for the Scottish Parliament. We interrogated this matter as far as we could, and every time the answer we came back was that it was safe to oppose same-sex marriage and safe to be in favour of it. Of course, there have been legal opinions, but we wonder sometimes if it is the case that he who pays the piper calls the tune and expects everybody else to dance to it. You look at where it's coming from, the legal opinion, and you maybe judge it that way. With our work within the church, we have to keep on saying, do not be afraid. That phrase that comes in the Bible so many hundreds of times. Wherever you stand, do not be afraid.
Can I ask you as well, the United Reformed Church, as I understand it, is a mainstream Christian denomination within the Reformed tradition. So to that extent, you're similar to the Church of Scotland. And another similarity would be that there's a range of views contained within your denomination. But despite those two things, you've come to a different conclusion, and you welcome the legislation. And how soon would your individual celebrants who are in favour of same-sex marriage be able to perform marriage if the legislation is passed?
I can tell you for a fact there are people who would wish to register as celebrants as soon as it is legally possible to do so, and some who definitely would never register. That's the nature of the church, that it contains a diversity of opinion, and we support the bill because it is permissive and not prescriptive. And we have, if you like, the endorsement of the Scottish Synod when we asked a gathering about that is the way that we proceed.
I think it was a telling point when the opposition spokespeople were asked about what they would like to see to make it robust. And nobody could come up with anything that would make it robust enough for them. And I think it really reflects a fear which, in our opinion, is unfounded, but it is a fear that they are in some way being victimised. But the evidence suggests that the bill is robust. From everything that I've seen, that it can't be legally challenged. And the interesting point which came out at the end from the Church of Scotland representative is if they ultimately feel that they are going to be forced into it, they have the option, if they want, again, it's their choice, to opt out and then do blessings for people who have had a civil marriage.
Mr Bevan.
I think there are 7 countries in the Council of Europe who've already progressed legislation of this nature, and I did check with our lawyers yesterday. We're not aware of any issue in relation to the courts from those countries who have had this legislation in place for quite some time.
Very straightforward question. Do any of you believe that having children is a central purpose of marriage?
No.
We have to say no, because, as I said before, we believe the marriage is primarily the fellowship of the couple, though in marriage seen collectively as a social institution and a social good, certainly marriage greatly adds to the stability and to the benefit of children, taking marriage understood as quite widely.
To my earlier point, I just would reiterate that if the opponents believe that marriage is good for children, then it seems logical for all of those people who have children, they should be able to get married.
Reverend Coleman.
One further point is that I think Mr Wright's already brought it up, that religious or faith celebrants have a right but not a duty to solemnise a marriage. And that we would like, certainly if you're talking about protections, to safeguard the conscientious option of not going ahead with any given marriage for conscientious reasons. And that goes back in the history of most churches a very long time, irrespective of what sort of marriage we're talking about.
Anyone else?
I guess another thing, just to finally say about the concept of marriage, is that the view purported currently by most religions is this, a current view of marriage, but marriage, as you'll be aware, has been about owning children, about owning women, about denying rights, about stigmatisation with illegitimacy, and all of these things are fundamentally changed. So this is just another small change to marriage that's being proposed, and that needs to be recognised, that if those who don't hold a religious view should be allowed to do that.
Thank you. Mr Bevan? No, thank you. Thank you all very much for your contribution. That concludes today's meeting. Our next meeting will take place on Thursday the 19th of September and will include further oral evidence on the Marriage and Civil Partnership Bill. Thank you all very much.